When the Elir first began collecting humans, they did not think of themselves as conquerors. They thought of themselves as curators. The Elir were physically frail, narrow-limbed, light-boned, almost delicate to the eye. On any world with real gravity and real weather, they would have died quickly without their machines. But what their bodies lacked, their technology made up for tenfold. Their ships crossed systems without heat bloom. Their containment fields could stop charging herd beasts in midair. Their neural pacifiers could quiet riot populations without drawing blood. Their cities were towers of glass, light, and perfect climate control, suspended above moons and oceans. They could never have survived on unaided. They studied dangerous species the way others studied storms. And when their probes finally confirmed that humans existed in scattered colonies across the Perseus Reach, the Elir became fascinated. A bipedal omnivore, muscular, tool-using, social, territorial. Clever enough to build warships, primitive enough to still live close to violence, strong enough to be interesting. Too interesting, some argued, to approach directly. But the dominion of curators was not built on caution. So they made a compromise. Take one human, study him, condition him, place him in a controlled zoological habitat on the ring station menagerie spire where paying dignitaries could observe an authentic apex mammal from a rising species. They did not choose a soldier. They did not choose a politician. They did not choose an engineer. They chose a man named David Wren, taken from a lonely freight outpost beyond the traffic lanes of Earth's nearer colonies, because he appeared to live alone, spoke little, worked at night, and had no family who would raise immediate alarm. That was their first mistake. Their second was assuming that a quiet human was an average one. David woke inside light. Soft white overhead panels, smooth walls, a curved, transparent barrier, a floor textured to imitate stone, artificial foliage, a little running stream, a fabricated shelter cave in one corner. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic beneath the false scent of earth. An enclosure. He stayed still for several seconds, breathing shallowly, not because he was confused, but because he was counting. 4 cameras in the ceiling, 2 vents, 1 service hatch set flush with the wall. The transparent barrier was not true glass. There was a faint shimmer in the edges, some kind of field-backed laminate, strong. Beyond it, on a raised viewing platform, stood 6 aliens in silver observation harnesses. Thin necks, long hands, narrow shoulders, skin like pale blue porcelain, weak. David's lips parted in a slow smile. One of the aliens spoke through a translator mounted in the wall. Human specimen. Remain calm. You are safe. David rolled onto his back, then sat up. He took in the enclosure again, then looked at the observers one by one with such steady attention that 2 of them shifted their feet. "Safe," he repeated. The translator rendered his voice in clipped Illyric. Another alien, older by posture and ornament, stepped forward. "You have been selected for behavioral study and non-lethal public exhibition." David tilted his head. "A zoo." The older alien hesitated. "A cultural ecology display." David laughed softly. The sound made the nearest technician flinch. That flinch pleased him. He stood. Even sedated, even after transport, he moved with a compact, easy strength that did not match the file they had built around him. He was not enormous. That might have been less disturbing. He was of ordinary height, lean through the waist, broad enough in the shoulders to suggest labor, not spectacle. Brown hair cropped short, a narrow face, clear eyes, unremarkable at first glance. Men like that had crossed streets beside victims for centuries without notice. "What is your name?" the older alien asked. David looked directly at him. "David. No family marker?" "David is enough." The alien consulted a slate. "You displayed low social integration, limited community bonds, high tolerance for isolation, predatory circadian adaptation. David's smile widened a fraction. Predatory. The alien mistook this for curiosity. Your species displays significant aggression potential. We intend to understand and manage it. David walked to the transparent barrier until he stood inches from it, studying his own faint reflection over theirs. And if you can't? The older alien did not answer quickly enough. That told David more than words. The Elir named the exhibit Human Male, Baseline Territorial Variant. Visitors stood above the habitat and watched him eat, sleep, pace, exercise, and stare. At first, David gave them what they wanted. He played the animal. He tested the perimeter only enough to appear frustrated, not methodical. He slept at irregular intervals. He sat near the artificial stream and watched the tourists with the bland patience of a predator conserving energy. School groups pointed at his hands. Diplomats murmured over his musculature. Biologists recorded his gait. Public docents explained that humans evolved under harsh ecological pressures and retained a set of residual competitive instincts that, though dangerous, could likely be redirected under superior guidance. David listened to every word. He also listened to the guards. The guards were not military. Menagerie Spire did not expect war. It expected theft, vandalism, the occasional activist intrusion, panicked specimens, status incidents with the wealthy. The Elir trusted fields, locks, drones, and sedation grids. Too much. David learned their routines in 3 days. He learned which guards talked to fill silence, which one checked his restraint baton compulsively when nervous, which one stared too long into the enclosure, looking for signs of personality, and which avoided eye contact entirely. He learned the feed times, the shift rotations, the maintenance intervals, and the exact 7-second lag between service hatch depressurization and magnetic latch engagement. He also learned something else. They had his file. Not the real one, of course, but enough scraps from public networks and old police dragnets to know that he had not simply disappeared from Earth unnoticed. A few headlines had made it into the Xenobehavior archive. Display killer, still at large. Police believe bodies were arranged post-mortem. Public fear grows after third exhibit murder. He stood beneath one of the hidden cameras and smiled up at it for a very long time. On the 4th day, when the senior xenobehaviorist entered the overhead observation gallery to present Menagerie Spire's human program to a visiting trade delegation, David gave his first true performance. He was seated cross-legged in the middle of the enclosure, unnaturally still. When the delegation arrived, he slowly lifted his head. Every eye above turned toward him. The xenobehaviorist, Curator Cell, began her lecture in smooth, professional tones. As you can see, the human responds strongly to audience density, but remains within projected adaptation parameters. David stood in one motion and walked to the barrier. Not rushed, not agitated, intentional. He raised one hand and placed it gently against the transparent wall. Then he smiled at the children in the front row. One of them waved. David waved back. Several adults relaxed immediately. A murmur of amusement moved through the gallery. Curator Cell smiled too, relieved. The mimicry drive is stronger than we expected. Social appeasement behavior. David spoke softly. When do you come inside? The translator, keyed to all human vocalizations for research purposes, broadcast his question to the entire gallery. Silence followed, then nervous laughter. Curator Cell recovered first. The specimen is displaying threat posture language. Note the opportunistic use of direct address. David's hand remained on the barrier. His eyes were on her now. I said, he repeated, when do you come inside? Something in the way he asked it, not loud, not wild, not dramatic, but intimate, drained the amusement from the room. The delegation withdrew early. That night, Curator Cell ordered a higher-grade sedative mixed into his feed. That was the third mistake. David ate around it. The first death occurred in Service Corridor Blue 19, directly behind the human exhibit. The victim was a junior containment technician named Rel. He should have been impossible to reach. The corridor was locked from both ends. The maintenance hatch opening into the enclosure was still sealed. The cameras in the corridor blacked out for only 11 seconds. When security finally forced entry, they found Rel seated upright on a supply crate beneath an emergency light, hands folded in his lap. His throat had been crushed, not cut. Crushed. Above him, written in sanitation foam on the wall in careful looping common trade, were the words, "Average human." Panic spread too quickly for official statements to contain. Menagerie Spire closed its public sectors and halted all tours. Internal networks lit with rumors before command censorship could suppress them. Some said the human had somehow reached through the field. Some said there were multiple humans. Some said Exhibit H1 had escaped and returned to the enclosure on purpose. Curator Cell called it impossible. Chief Security Director Vane said impossible was now irrelevant. He ordered a station-wide lockdown. David was still in his enclosure when the tactical team arrived to verify containment. He was lying near the stream with one arm over his eyes as if asleep. Vane watched through the barrier for a full minute. Then David removed his arm, looked directly at him, and smiled. Not triumphant, amused. Vane felt cold move through his limbs. "Open the enclosure," he said. 3 subordinates turned toward him in disbelief. He did not repeat himself. 2 armored drone platforms entered first. Then the field dropped in measured stages. Then Vane and his team stepped inside with stunners, restraint frames, and a portable null field projector. David did not resist. They searched every surface, every stone, every drain line, every artificial tree root, every vent. No tunnel, no breach, no hidden tool. No sign of how he had left the enclosure to kill Rel. On the way out, David said quietly to Vane, "You should search the walls above your bed." Vane did not react. He did not sleep in his assigned quarters that cycle. That decision saved his life. When the ceiling panel over his actual sleeping chamber was opened during the sweep, the technicians found a dead maintenance drone hanging upside down by braided wiring. Its camera lenses had been gouged out. Across its chassis, carved with a sharpened feeding utensil, were the words, "Closer." The station ceased to function as a zoo. It became a maze. Security fields flickered. Local power losses rolled in precise patterns through animal containment sectors. Sedation mist triggered in empty corridors. Lift systems stopped between decks. Someone hijacked the emergency broadcast lattice and replaced safety directives with old Earth news bulletins about the curator killings. A human female reporter's voice echoed through polished alien halls. "Authorities are warning residents not to approach any isolated display site." Static. Another voice. "Police believe the killer stages victims for maximum public impact." Static. Then David himself, calm and conversational. "You remembered me." Chief Director Vane sealed half the station and pulled every available unit into concentric security zones around the human sector. That was logical. That was disciplined. That did nothing. David moved like a thing evolved under a heavier sky. When he rushed an Elir, he seemed to arrive before their eyes could follow. When he struck, fragile alien bones failed quickly. When he lifted one of them, it looked effortless, indecently easy, as though the physical difference between species had been hidden from them by glass and theory until the moment it mattered. But what broke them was not speed. It was design. David did not merely kill. He displayed. A sedation officer was found laid out inside an empty avian vault, arranged beneath a perch light with every monitoring device placed neatly around the body in concentric rings. A response team entered a botanical dome to find one of their own suspended from irrigation cables over a pool, rotating slowly in the artificial moonlight while the speakers played archived human true crime commentary lifted from open networks. A senior curator disappeared from a sealed office. Hours later, security cracked the door to Central Educational Gallery and found her seated at the docent podium, chin lifted, one hand positioned as though mid-lecture. Behind her, every display screen showed David's public file from Earth, repeated headline after headline. Display murders continue. The killer wants to be seen. The city is living inside his theater. The Elir had wanted to put a human on display. David simply improved the exhibit. Curator Cell lasted longer than most because David found her interesting. She had been the first to describe him as manageable, the first to sell the exhibit, the first to reduce him, in front of paying guests, to a set of instincts and metrics. Now she moved through sealed medical sectors under full guard, trying to assemble a behavioral model while the station died around her. "Do not call him irrational," she snapped at a trembling analyst. "He is highly organized. He wants witness sequencing. He wants narrative control." The analyst stared at the casualty feed. "Why?" Cell looked at the nearest screen where another body had just been found in the Juvenile Education Annex. "Because terror lasts longer when it is curated." The analyst whispered, "Then what does he want?" No one answered. The answer arrived 1 hour later. Cell entered a supposedly sterile prep suite with 4 guards and found the lights already on. At the center of the room stood a transparent display case, the type used for rare arthropods and venomous miniatures. Inside it sat a human feeding tray. On the tray was one small folded note. Cell knew immediately that opening the case was a mistake. She opened it anyway. The note contained only one line. "You built the cage so I would have rooms to work in." The rear guard screamed first. David had been above them, flattened against the service recess in the ceiling like a hunting animal in a cave mouth. He dropped behind the line, broke one neck in silence, drove another guard face first into the instrument column hard enough to collapse the skull ridge, and by the time the remaining 2 raised their stunners, he had already put Cell between himself and the discharge arc. The blast took her in the spine. She collapsed without understanding she had fallen. David looked down at her, then at the 2 horrified guards who had just crippled their own curator. He smiled. "See," he said, "you're helping." He killed the guards slowly enough that their panic had time to rip apart the rest of the medical deck over open comms. Cell died listening. By then, the station command council was ready to bargain. That sentence alone would have been considered unthinkable a week earlier. The Elir did not bargain with specimens. They conditioned them, sedated them, relocated them, if necessary, destroyed them. But Menagerie Spire had become a proof of a more terrible principle. Their technology could contain force, but not imagination wearing force. Chief Director Vane finally opened a direct channel to David through the station-wide speakers. Every sector fell silent to hear it. "David," he said, and hated the intimacy of using the name, "the station will provide you transport. We will return you to Earth, immediately. No further study, no detention, no pursuit." For several seconds there was no reply. Then the laughter came. Not loud, not insane, warm, genuine. It moved through the speakers like something alive. When David answered, his voice was almost kind. "I'm having too much fun." A long pause followed. Then he added, with a private savor that made every Elir listening feel seen in the worst way, "I haven't felt fear like yours since my first kill." No one on Menagerie Spire moved for 3 full heartbeats after that. He continued, "You know what's funny? Your feeds have all my old headlines, your commentaries, the panic, the speculation, the public warnings. I forgot how good it sounds when people talk about me like weather. A console shattered somewhere off mic. David laughed again. Now you want to send me home? Why would I leave? You finally built me an audience. The council authorized lethal measures. Atmosphere venting in compromised sectors, plasma denial corridors, hunter drones with autonomic target release, nanofog trackers, full-spectrum paralysis fields. It all failed. Some failures were technical. David learned fast, and he understood by instinct how to turn pursuit into movement and movement into ambush. But the deeper failure was psychological. The Elir were too weak for their own tools. Everything they had built assumed the operator could stand close enough to use it. David made closeness unbearable. He left a tactical commander alive long enough to send 3 contradictory distress calls before arranging him in the drone maintenance bay beneath a ring of deactivated hunter units, each one facing inward like attentive museum guests. He turned the nanofog trackers into a beacon trail that drew security into Zoological Hall 9, where they found not David, but 3 prior victims displayed behind the very transparent partitions once meant for dangerous fauna. He hijacked the public announcement system once more, not with threats this time, but with excerpts from old Earth broadcasts about his murders, the sort of breathless true crime segments that had followed him for years. Viewers are advised that the following crime scene details may be disturbing. Police believe the killer derived satisfaction from post-mortem display. The staging suggests he wants discovery as much as death. Each line made him more active, not less. Curator Sell had been right, though it no longer mattered. He wanted witness before memory. He wanted the scene understood before the body was feared. Menagerie Spire had become exactly the kind of place he would have designed for himself if anyone had been foolish enough to ask. The end began in the Grand Apex Gallery. It was the largest public chamber on the station, once intended to display predator species from 6 worlds in theatrical habitat simulations. Tiered walkways ringed a cavernous central floor. Lighting rigs mimicked sunset over red stone. Climate jets carried warm, artificial wind. David took it for his final stage. Chief Director Vane and the last council survivors entered under truce signal because by then they had no language left but desperation. Bodies were already in place, not torn apart, positioned. A guard kneeling beside the shattered remains of a hunter drone, as if offering it up. A curator seated in a viewing chair facing the main floor, head turned toward the center as though waiting for the show to begin. 3 empty exhibit plaques pulled from storage and arranged on the stone. David stood beneath the false sunset in station-issue gray, spattered dark to the elbows, one hand resting on the rail of the old predator pit. He looked less like an escapee than a host. Vane spoke first. "We are prepared to return you to Earth." David smiled faintly. "You said that already." "We mean it." "You meant it before." Vane swallowed. "What do you want?" David looked around the gallery, at the tiers, at the bodies, at the lighting, at the station that had tried to make him into a lesson and instead become his masterpiece. Then he looked back at them and said, "I wanted this." One of the counselors broke. "Why?" David's expression changed only slightly. Not rage, not madness, something emptier. "Because you watched." Silence. Then Vane, almost whispering now, "If we open a flight path to Earth, will you go?" David considered it. It was the first real hesitation he had shown. Then somewhere in the gallery speakers, because he had wired it so, one more Earth broadcast began to play, an old human anchor, voice trembling with fascinated disgust. "Authorities fear the display killings may continue so long as public attention sustains the offender's compulsion." David closed his eyes and inhaled like a man savoring perfume. When he opened them again, he was smiling wider than before. "Listen to that," he said softly. "They missed me." The counselor stared. He went on almost fondly. "They talked about me for months. They mapped me, guessed at me, built stories around me. And you—" He gestured to the dead, the lights, the gallery. "You made it bigger!" Vane tried one final time. "David, we will send you home." David laughed. Not at them, at the choice. "Home?" he said. "You think Earth is where I was happiest?" He tapped the rail with one blood-dark finger. "I'm having too much fun." Then his voice lowered, intimate again, the voice of a man telling the truth because it felt good to say it. "I haven't felt fear like yours since my first kill." That broke the last of them. One counselor ran. Another raised a stunner with shaking hands. Vane shouted something that vanished beneath the sound of failing lights. And David moved. The false sunset went dark. The gallery became screams, impacts, bodies hitting stone, the crack of fragile bones, the sharp mechanical whine of a discharge weapon going wild in the black. Vane stumbled backward, half blind, hearing movement everywhere and nowhere, hearing David laugh once from the upper tier and then, impossibly, from the floor below. When Emergency Red finally returned, the gallery had changed again. The remaining counselors were dead. The one who had run was hanging over the Predator pit rail, feet almost touching the floor, positioned so that anyone entering the chamber would have to look up first. David was gone. On the main display wall, in white station text 20 feet high, were 6 words. "Do not send me anywhere quiet." Menagerie Spire was abandoned 40 hours later. The surviving Elir fled in sealed cutters, leaving whole sectors dark, decompressed, or burning. No retrieval team ever reclaimed the station. Officially, it suffered a cascading containment disaster during xenological operations. The internal report remained classified for 3 generations. Unofficially, among the Elir, another story spread. Not about a dangerous human, about a dangerous mistake. They had wanted a specimen for study, then a beast for display, then a prisoner, then a problem to be returned home. At every stage, they had believed they were still naming the thing correctly. They had not understood that David did not care where he was kept, so long as there were eyes, fear, corridors, and time. The final recovered footage from Grand Apex Gallery became required viewing for every Elir containment officer thereafter. It showed the moment before the lights died. David beneath the false sunset, smiling like a man being welcomed back onto a stage. And if there was one sentence that ended Elir human collection forever, it was not written by command. It was a note found months later in a maintenance spine 2 sectors from the shuttle docks, pinned neatly to a map of the station in David's hand. "If this is your zoo, never visit Earth." Like and subscribe for more stories that are uploaded regularly. Feel free to leave a comment or a suggestion about a story you would like to hear.